I met Justin Smith in 2010 at a political campaign event for his opponent, Carl Bruning. Now, Justin Smith mistook me for someone else who was organizing the event, but it was an interesting first introduction. I was there as an investigative journalist. Justin Smith was running for the office of sheriff in 2010. That was his first go-around as elected sheriff. His opponent, Carl Bruning, was hosting a campaign event. It was not a public event. Justin Smith was not invited because it was basically a fundraiser for his opponent, Carl Bruning. But whatever Justin Smith thought prompted him to show up at this private campaign event, and he was furious when he arrived. He thought for some reason I was the event organizer, and he approached me, he got in my face, he was physically touching my shoes, that's how close he was. He was sweating, his face was red, and he was yelling at me for not inviting him to this private campaign event. That's how I met Justin Smith. Here we are 14 years later at the Colorado Court of Appeals building, the Ralph L. Carr building. And if you don't know about Ralph Carr and why this building is named for him, do some history, little research on the history of Colorado. He's quite an interesting human being. Anyway, back to Justin Smith. Justin Smith and I had, in the past 14 years, numerous interactions where Justin Smith showed his true colors, and that is usually red-faced and sweaty. He has a very short fuse. His temper is easily inflamed, and there were numerous times where I saw him in my face, unprovoked by me. He usually sweats, his face always turns red, and he gets, physically you can see him, his collar, his neck around his collar is sweaty and red. That's who the sheriff of Larimer County was for 12 years. So I'm at the Court of Appeals today to file the notice of appeal against Justin Smith. This is basically a formality so that I preserve my right to appeal, but because Judge Jouard ruled on the motion for sanctions against Justin Smith's attorney, Brian Reynolds, the case at the district level has taken an interesting turn. So I'm only filing this appeal in case Judge Jouard does not rule according to law and I'm forced to come down here. So I'm going to read to you from the statement of the case of the appeal, notice of appeal that I just filed with the clerk of the court so that you can know exactly why we're here. Statement of the case. Sheriff Justin Smith admitted that he directed Lieutenant John Feyen and other law enforcement officers at the Larimer County Sheriff's Office to illegally attach an actively tracking GPS tracking device to an SUV owned by investigative journalist Stacy Lynn. In secret files that were hidden for 8 years, law enforcement officers wrote reports that proved numerous officers knew it was illegal to track Lynn. Sergeant Joe Shellhammer admitted that the sheriff's office had no right to possess more than 900 records that he downloaded from the illegally attached tracker. He also admitted that he destroyed that evidence before Lynn and her attorneys were even aware it existed. Officers who were acting under Sheriff Justin Smith's direction admitted that no warrant for the tracker was ever obtained, in spite of the fact that the tracker was attached to Lynn's SUV for more than 4 months. Captain Robert Coleman confessed that the absolute absence of records in the case file about the illegally attached GPS tracker was not acceptable. The tracker was discovered because Lynn noticed that officers from various law enforcement agencies were repeatedly following her, even while she was on private property. Marked cars from various law enforcement agencies were repeatedly seen parked near her SUV, and one officer even admitted to trespassing at Lynn's home. The secret records about the illegally attached GPS tracker had been intentionally kept in a hidden file for 8 years. All the while, Sheriff Justin Smith, Larimer County Attorney David A. Rode, and other officials repeatedly told Lynn and her attorneys that no such records existed. So, by the time Lynn and her attorneys received the secret file, the statute of limitations had expired, and her federal lawsuit against the officers for Fourth Amendment violations and conspiracy was dismissed. During a nasty political campaign for the office of Larimer County Sheriff in 2022, 11 years after the illegal GPS tracker was found, Sheriff Justin Smith endorsed John Feyen, who was then the Assistant Chief of Police at Fort Collins Police Services. When John Feyen's history of illegal actions with the GPS tracker came to light during the campaign, in order to cover up his and Feyen's criminal actions, Sheriff Justin Smith viciously lied and maliciously defamed Stacy Lynn. The above history is what brings us together now. 8th Judicial District Court Judge Stephen J. Jouard denied defendant Justin Smith's motion to dismiss. Smith provided ample evidence, additional evidence, that his lies were knowingly made with malicious intent. Justin Smith's defense attorney, Brian Reynolds, admitted that he destroyed the evidence. Reynolds called Lynn, or the judge, a bitch. Reynolds was found in contempt. But then, just as plaintiff Stacy Lynn was preparing to drive to Denver to file this notice of appeal, 8th Judicial District Court Judge Stephen J. Jouard issued an order on plaintiff's motion for sanctions. And so, new doors have opened for fair and just remedies at the district court level. Even so, to preserve her right to appeal, Lynn timely files this notice. Perhaps you're curious about why the old blood Republicans in Larimer County had to elect John Feyen as the next sheriff of Larimer County. Why didn't they want an honest cop like Jeff Fisher? What was their motivation for choosing John Feyen, a known lawbreaker? Why did they choose a law enforcement officer who has decades of history of violating the Constitution? Why didn't they want Jeff Fisher? The old blood Republicans didn't want Jeff Fisher because he was not able to be controlled. People like John Feyen are easily manipulated. So Jeff Fisher didn't fit into their plan. It's not just John Feyen and Jeff Fisher. You can look at dirty politicians and corrupt governments all throughout the United States. Larimer County is not alone in this problem, but Larimer County is special. And as these videos continue, you'll see why Larimer County is perhaps the most corrupt county in the United States.